For the first time in decades, a column of hostile army came close to the striking distance of Moscow, forcing Russia to take emergency steps. And it did not come from warring Ukraine. The rebel army was being led by a former ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin. The man leading the pack of hundreds of rebels of private military group Wagner was Yevgeny Prigozhin. It captured one of the biggest cities in Russia, Rostov-on-Don, and had been steadily marching towards Moscow. Prigozhin was upset and he claimed that the Russian military had deprived the Wagner group of supplies of food and ammunition in Ukraine. The furious Prigozhin ordered his private army to march toward Moscow to topple the Russian military leadership. But negotiations followed. The march of Prigozhin came to a halt at about 200 kilometers from Moscow, and he retreated. As part of the deal, Prigozhin has been exiled to Belarus and he is being investigated by Russia's Federal Security Service. As the future of Wagner's leader remains uncertain, his past and ascent into prominence has been making news for the last few days. Yevgeny Prigozhin was born in St. Petersburg in 1961. He went to a sports academy to be a cross-country skier, but he didn't make it to be a professional skier, and after finishing the school, he fell in with a crowd of petty criminals. They used to rob people in St. Petersburg, and during one of those attempts, 18-year-old Prigozhin was caught and was convicted to spend 13 years in prison. After his release in 1990, Prigozhin started selling hot dogs prepared from the kitchen of a family apartment in St. Petersburg. Prigozhin had an incredible ability to befriend people from higher up. In 1995, with the help of his contacts, he opened a wine shop and a restaurant in St. Petersburg. The high society and political leaders of St. Petersburg frequented Prigozhin's restaurant as it became famous for fine dining. One of his frequent customers was Vladimir Putin, who was then the deputy mayor of St. Petersburg.
So in that period from the mid-90s onwards, he became a very familiar figure in St. Petersburg and also someone who was in the good books of Mr. Putin at that time. And there was also a power play in the final years of the Yeltsin presidency when Mr. Putin was positioning himself to take over. And that is where I would say that this proximity developed, and Mr. Yevgeny provided a number of, I would say, services, if you could put it that way, for Mr. Putin.
With his influence, Prigozhin was able to get contacts to cater for major government events. When Putin became Prime Minister of Russia in 1999, he brought foreign dignitaries to Prigozhin's restaurants. In the next step, Prigozhin acquired bigger contracts worth 200 million euros to provide food to schools in Moscow, and in 2015, he won a massive contract worth of 1 billion euros to provide food for the Russian army. When Russia seized Crimea in 2014, Putin was exploring the idea of plausible deniability. Several private military groups started emerging and Wagner was one of them. To build the Wagner army, Prigozhin recruited prisoners. The military provided land for the Wagner in southern Russia, and in 2015, when Putin sent the Russian army to Syria to support Bashar al-Assad, Prigozhin won the contracts for food and supplies and also dispatched the Wagner troops into Syria. Later, they were also deployed to several countries in Africa, and Wagner troops have been infamous for the cruelty they unleashed in those places. Wagner Group and Prigozhin rose to prominence when Russia started to invade Ukraine last year. Around 50,000 Wagner soldiers have been fighting in Ukraine, and they played an important role in the war efforts of Russia here. But after the failed mutiny attempt, now Putin has accused Prigozhin of treason and he has been exiled in Belarus.
He has, in a way, backed down because he wanted the Russian defense minister to be sacked. That was one of his principal demands. Whereas today, on Monday, the news coming out of Moscow is that the defense minister is very much in charge and he is visiting his troops in Ukraine and so on. So I would say that the future for Yevgeny is uncertain. Once President Putin is able to establish his control again, after all, he has many levers of power, my sense is that they would try and corner Yevgeny Prigozhin.
But definitely there are red flags in terms of the way he reacted, the way he shot down his army, shot down aircrafts, helicopters, how far he got into Russia. Those are big concerns for Russia, which was considered one of the most strongest armies after the United States.
According to experts, the future of Yevgeny Prigozhin is uncertain and definitely not as promising as it used to be. That's why American political scientist Ian Bremmer called Prigozhin a dead man walking.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.
She's working her way to the corner office. Business Standard.